home under construction. We'll be back there after the World Cup. Tonight we're talking about the elections. In a year's time, South Africa will go to the polls nationally and provincially to elect a new government for the 6th time since 1994. I mean, of course, in charge of that election is the Independent Electoral Commission. They have been in the news for all kinds of wrong reasons recently, but also dealing with quite a lot of controversies. The Tlokwe controversy, in particular, got the court to tell them to get their act together where the voters' role is concerned. And of course, we would like to know more in detail about what they are doing to fix some of the things that were pointed out there. But of course, also in the news about the previous CEO living under a cloud, the election of the current chairperson, and so on. So things that would begin to question some of the credibility that the IEC has been known for. And tonight we'll be looking at that detail as the election season comes to pass. Let's take a look at these clips that opened that election season.
Fellow South Africans, the journey to the 6th general election has started. We all have a responsibility as South Africans to play our part in strengthening our democracy and building an ever better and prosperous South Africa. This starts with registering to vote.
The legislation does not require a voter to give us a proof of residence when they register. And I think it is largely because you are trying to accommodate every person who is a South African as per the Constitution. Some of the people might not necessarily have properties, they might not have anything that they can actually be able to give to you as proof of residence. It does happen. But we are guided by the Constitution in terms of the determination of who qualifies for registration. And it says in the Constitution that you must be a South African and must be 18 years old in order to be able to participate in the elections.
Well, to help me understand the state of readiness of the Independent Electoral Commission as we march towards that very historic date of the 6th general election, my guest tonight is Tselane, who is the Deputy Chairperson of the IEC. Let's talk frankly to him. Tselane, good evening to you, and thank you so much for being my guest tonight.
Thank you very much for having me here.
You've been in the IEC for close to a decade, and this week, I mean, we're meeting here on a very historic week of June 76, some of the stuff that inspired you to be here. What is your own reflection about, democracy, and how young people, who, in a sense, have a legacy to live up to of what the youth of 76 have done. How have you assessed whether they have embraced this kind of democracy, especially when it comes to participating in electoral activities?
I think to a large extent, we see more and more these days of youngsters who are participating in the electoral processes. You may be aware of the Fees Must Fall campaign. I was saying to you earlier on that my son Kululeko was also part of the leadership of the Fees Must Fall movement. Now, if you look at that generation, you begin to realize that they actually have fought very gallant struggles, and I think to a large extent, the older generation was beginning to be a little bit uncomfortable about that campaign. But that was a very noble campaign that needed to be supported by everybody within the society. And yes, we are saying we can't say that the youth are a homogeneous entity. You've got those that are unemployed, you've got those in tertiary institutions, and therefore their access to democratic processes is different based on where they are and the platform that they're using to be able to access democratic processes. It is our responsibility as the Electoral Commission as well as the political parties to make sure that we structure the message in such a manner that it can be attractive.
But do you think young people have begun to take something like elections for granted? I mean, we're talking here about it being the 6th election. I mean, can you believe it? If you look at 94 now, that you've gone to the polls 6 times after it had not been, a norm to go to the polls at all for decades. Do you think they're taken for granted, or do you still find that there are young leaders and activists with a bit of fire in their belly?
I think there are many that they've got the fire in their belly. We just have to structure a message in such a manner that democracy can actually be attractive to the youth. At the moment, you've got uneven participation of the youth. If you look at the numbers within our voters' roll, you can see that we are still struggling in terms of making sure that we can capture as many youth as possible. That's why the majority of our campaign now is geared towards making sure that we can reach out to the youth who are using various platforms to try to reach out to those categories. Of
but what is your assessment of their own participation? I mean, there are numerous elections. I mean, besides the local government elections and the upcoming national ones, there's the by-elections, you know, every time and again. Has the participation of young people increased in those particular elections? And what has the IEC done about it?
Like I'm saying, that the numbers are not that great in terms of the youth participation in our voters' roll. And the campaigns that we have embarked on are the campaigns that are aimed at making sure that we can reach out to that category of the youth.
Are there things that worry you about the credibility of the IEC now being questioned? I mean, we had the Tlokwe situation where the wires caught in the lens said, you guys need to go back and sort out the voters' roll. I mean, if a voters' roll is wrong, you could eventually have people questioning the outcomes of an election. Secondly, you had your CEO having to go under a cloud after controversies related to the acquisition of your head office. And then, as if that was not enough, when a new chairperson was elected, there were questions about his closeness to the former president and what have you. Can you give me a sense of whether, from where you are sitting, there are issues that should worry us about the credibility of the IEC? I
think we've got a very resilient organization. We've got a pool of electoral expertise that we've developed over many years. If you look at people who are working within this organization, the majority of them, just like me, have worked with this organization just under 20 years. So it really shows you that we've got quite a number of people who really understand the electoral process. Those are the people who determine the integrity and the credibility of our organization. So I'm quite confident that we've got a very resilient organization that it will be able to overcome whatever challenges that are there. You've
probably been one of the longest serving commissioners. I mean, were you irritated by being overlooked to be chairperson? I mean, a lot of people are expecting you to take over that particular role. I mean, are you over that? What is happening in that regard?
I'm a friend to Tiego Mseneke, and naturally that relationship would have given me access to the former Deputy Chief Justice, Justice Jikhamu Seneke. Justice Jikhamu Seneke was overlooked 3 times, and therefore I had to learn on how he dealt with the issues. But also, one of the judges said to me that I'm close to, that if a certain group of people does not like you, you must actually wear it as a badge of honor. I'm wearing it as a badge of honor.
Do you think there was an expectation, and I know that this may be a sensitive question, do you think there was an expectation that the IEC would, in a sense, lean towards the progressive forces, in a sense, even as it does a job of being independent? I'm asking this because you were in the news, front page news, that you had a bit of a spat with the General Secretary and the Deputy General Secretary at an IEC dinner, where they were almost questioning where you stand or something to that effect. Can you address me on that briefly?
Well, that issue is currently being addressed by the President. Ever since the issue arose, it has been in his hands. And I think it would be inappropriate at this stage for me to comment on that. We have given him an opportunity to deal with the issue, and I think at an appropriate time he will actually be able to indicate to us how he wishes to deal with that issue.
Have you ever dealt with any issue at all about that had to do with the rigging of elections in the 20 years that you have been there?
Fortunately, the organization has never really rigged the elections, and therefore I've never had to deal with the rigging. With the rigging of the elections.
After the break, I want us to zone in on the issue of the Tlokwe judgment and the whole issue of the voters' roll. You are on Frankly Speaking. You are watching us from Studio 12 in Auckland Park. Tonight you can still follow our show on hashtag Frankly Speaking. You can tweet us at JJ Tabane at SABC News Online. Let's take a break.
SABCnews.com is your one-stop digital portal to all the news you need. With a website that is easy to use on mobile, SABC News prides itself in being the primary source of public service content across multiple platforms. Watch live streams of all the big news events on the SABC News YouTube channel, which is one of the most viewed South African YouTube channels globally. And catch up on the best of SABC television and radio news. Follow breaking news on all of the SABC News social media platforms, interact with SABC News on Facebook, and stay connected on Twitter for the latest headlines and real-time updates by our reporters. SABC News, everywhere.
Technology is used for both positive and negative.
Some governments block the internet in times of protest.
With this internet blackout, it's impossible for me to do it, so I have to travel to Douala.
This act is a true violation of the rights of citizens.
In Africa, people are always coming up with innovative ways to use technology to solve some of their problems.
The more interesting piece of technology is actually the artificial intelligence.
AI, it's utilizing data to make your life easier.
On Network, we'll give you Africa's technology and social media news.
Catch Network with Spumelele Zondi every Saturday at 8:30 p.m.
Criminals are armed and dangerous than the police.
They are heavily equipped with AK-47.
What kind of society are we going to live in when our children are being killed in this manner?
If you have 10 generals in one country involved in corruption, you got a problem.
Police service is really in trouble.
Bekikele can do so much.
Welcome back to Frankly Speaking. My guest tonight, Tselane, is the Deputy Chairperson of the IEC. We're talking elections as we count down to the 6th general election. The whole issue of the credibility of the IEC has got to do with people believing that the outcome is something that is not tampered with. And hence I was raising the issue of rigging. I wasn't suggesting the IEC was rigging, but there was a question about the people who you hire as electoral officers, especially the ones who are temporary, who you bring in just before the elections. And there was also a big issue about whether these people are politically aligned and so on. And particular category was teachers. Tell me more about how you go about making sure that people who become officers, particularly as short-term, do not taint the elections.
I think this would require context. When we started with the IEC in 1997, the majority of people that we utilized in the electoral process were actually civil servants.
Okay.
You recall that we were not actually given sufficient resources to be able to recruit our own staff. So government provided us with teachers, provided us with even people from the army, the police, to assist us to deal with the registration.
Okay.
So the registration that we embarked on in 1997 was largely as a result of the participation of this category of people. Now, as time goes on, you begin to take those people who participated and assisted you as the backbone of your elections. Because remember, registration happens immediately before the elections. So we kept on utilizing the services of the teachers, not necessarily people coming from a particular trade union, but teachers as a whole.
Yes.
And but as time went on, we developed a criteria that we are using for recruitment. We discussed this with the political parties, and all the political parties accepted the criteria that we are using as a basis upon which we can recruit staff.
So no issue there from a point of view.
There was absolutely no issue.
Yeah.
However, IFP in particular is the one that had actually been raising the issue of teachers and saying you can't be using teachers, and they were saying that teachers are SADU, and SADU is affiliated to COSATU. COSATU is in alliance with the ANC, and therefore it means you are hiring people who are coming from the side of the ANC. So But we work with them.
And you think that was a genuine concern? I mean, in the midst of corruption engulfing every single sector of society, you know, the question is, wouldn't that slip into something like an election?
I mean, firstly, two things. I mean, it's a legitimate concern. I mean, any person, whoever raises the issue, particularly the political parties, we take them seriously.
Sure.
And therefore, any concerns that is raised by them, we've got to attend to it. And therefore, we attended to that.
Right.
And then we said, one of the things that we're going to be doing is to reduce the number of teachers that we have in the system in order to favor people coming from the ranks of the unemployed. But because we had the criteria that we had developed together with the political parties, we said to them, we are also going to give you the names of the presiding officers as well as the deputy presiding officers. And if any of the people who are recommending as people who are going to be working as our presiding officers, deputy president, there are issues around them. And then we are able to give us evidence about these people that they cannot be trusted. We will remove them. And we've done that in the past.
But interesting you say that. There are stories about, you know, electoral boxes being lost. There was an issue in the last election about Alexandra, you know, being one of the hotspots where, you know, ballot papers were found. Have you ever fired anybody in the 20 years you've been there who was found to be on the wrong side of keeping the integrity of the IEC intact?
We have not only fired people, we have sent people to prison. You know, if a person is not actually operating in compliance with our rules and regulations, we really take stern action. And the issue of the ballot papers that were lying around, it is largely because those ballot papers had already been counted. But still, even if they are counted, they still remain the most prestigious commodity that the electoral body has.
Yeah, because so if you are asked to recount and these things are missing, it will be a disaster.
Precisely. That's why we take that very, very seriously.
But the court also pointed a finger at you in the Tlokwe matter. Can you briefly tell me why is it that the IEC, up to what 3 years ago, still have an issue of voters' roll not being up to date, and this whole issue of addresses, you know, that can open a door, especially on a local government basis, because people have to vote where they live. They can't just vote at random in that regard. Can you explain how you got to a point where the court found, you know, your conduct to have been foul?
There are two elements here. The first one is that we are dealing with two categories of people. The first one are those people who registered prior to December 2003. There was no requirement for an address to be there. So there are many people who were registered during that period without addresses. But then the issue of addresses is introduced in the legislation in 2003.
Okay.
And then, unfortunately, again, you had a situation where some of our people, when people came and people said, I don't have an address, I'm staying in an informal settlement, they would still accept whatever information they have, but not necessarily capturing the addresses. But what the Constitutional Court then said is that in a situation where we do not have a conventional address, we must use what we call, or what is referred to as, sufficient particularities. In other words, sufficient information that can be able to assist you to locate a person within.
Like what? Can you explain what that means? Because it's either you have an address or you don't. What is particularity? What do you mean?
Yeah, someone was giving as an example and say, my address in Bethany, I would give as Kostateng near the church, or near the old ZCC church.
Okay, I see. So in villages there are no addresses. Is that what you mean?
You've got villages that do not have numbers, that don't have conventional addresses.
Yeah.
And
you had 15 years to fix it. I mean, it's surely something that you should have sort of raised the flag earlier on, so that when you then have town planning and you've got what we call rural development, those things are fixed, so that you don't have, after 15 years, say, oh, you know, come up with some other thing that would replace an address.
No, definitely. But I'm saying to you that the issue of non-availability of conventional address is not necessarily an issue at the moment. In a sense that we now have a new form that we're using, which we call REC-AS form, which is almost like an affirmation statement. And therefore, even if you don't have a conventional address, you'll give me sufficient information about, you describe where you stay, and I'll be able to get that information. So I don't have to try to get the conventional addresses before I can register people.
All right, let's talk after the break about how far you are in meeting what the Constitutional Court will consider sufficient to be able to fix this. Well, frankly speaking, we're talking the elections. We're counting down already. Probably in a year's time, we'll be going to the polls on our 6th democratic election, and the IEC in charge of that process. Are they credible? Tweet us at JJ Tabani at SABC News Online, and we'll continue that conversation after the break.
SABCnews.com is your one-stop digital portal to all the news you need. With a website that is easy to use on mobile, SABC News prides itself in being the primary source of public service content across multiple platforms. Watch live streams of all the big news events on the SABC News YouTube channel, which is one of the most viewed South African YouTube channels globally. And catch up on the best of SABC television and radio news. Follow breaking news on all of the SABC News social media platforms, interact with SABC News on Facebook, and stay connected on Twitter for the latest headlines and real-time updates by our reporters. SABC News, everywhere.
Welcome back to Frankly Speaking with me, JJ Tselane. We are coming from Studio 12 in Auckland Park tonight, not our usual home, but welcome to this conversation. On Twitter, Madam Page says, apparently the IEC has 300 million rand shortfall. Is it why there's a delay on the announcement of the election date? What led to the 300 million shortfall? And then Tloubata on Twitter also says, this thing of the IEC allowing people to punch their ID on the website and then you can get an address that way is dangerous because people may abuse that. Would you address those two before we go back to the talk on it?
The issue of the
300 million.
Let me deal with the announcement of the date of the elections. The date of the elections is announced by the president after consultation with the commission. That is for the national elections. But for the provincial elections, it is the premiers, again in consultation with the commission. So there is a process that we normally follow.
So there's no delay?
There is no delay. There is no delay because the elections have got to take place within 90 days after the date of the last elections. That 90 days kicks in from the 7th of May next year until the 5th of August next year.
So the election could be any of those in the 3 months?
They've got to be within that period.
Yes.
So, there is no delay at an appropriate time. The president
but the 300 million shortfall?
The 300 million shortfall is as a result, firstly, of two things. One is that when in 2016, there was a delay in terms of the date of the elections. Because remember, when you plan for the elections, you've got to work on the basis of a particular date. Now, if you are operating on the basis that the elections are going to be taking place on a particular month, and then that gets changed, it's got financial implications because it means you've got to secure facilities. The facilities that we're using at a local level are not our facilities.
So are you saying the last election took place outside the 3 months period we're talking about?
Not outside the 3 months. But our understanding as the commission at that stage was that it was going to be taking place during a particular period, but from time to time we kept on having consultation.
But you have planned within the 3 months.
Yeah, but I'm saying that if I have to follow your logic, it means I must secure the result center in Pretoria that we're using for 3 months instead of 2 weeks.
So that's why you have the shortfall.
It's got financial implications.
So it means that the election must be declared early enough for you not to have to make such a plan.
No, even if it is not earlier enough, as long as we are aware and then we are able to plan accordingly, it is much more easier that way. But that's the first aspect. The second aspect is that remember that now there are other exigencies that took place. The issue of the Constitutional Court judgment, which had to be implemented, also required a lot of resources, and it is as a result of but I'm saying that the two elements still do not have any relationship whatsoever with whether the date of the elections is going to be announced.
All right, and then the second tweet there about this idea of punching addresses onto the IEC website. Can you deal with that? While you are dealing with
we've got sufficient security and protection in our system, and then we are confident that the system cannot be abused.
But if I punch my ID, right? Does it then tell me what my address is? Because anybody can steal my ID and go and find out where I live. That's what this Tlobata is saying.
No. But I mean, your address in any case will be on the voters' roll. So the voters' roll is at the voting station.
Yeah.
Every person, every political party that has got access to the voters' roll has got your details.
I see. So there's no place to hide, essentially. So tell me now, the Tlokwe matter, are you ready for the next election from a point of view of addressing the concerns of the Constitutional Court?
We are indeed ready. Remember that we moved from 16 million people for whom we had either partial addresses or did not have sufficient information or no addresses at all.
Right.
At the moment, we're talking about 1.3 million people.
Okay.
I mean, it's a major jump from where we were. And we're still hopeful that the remaining a few months will help us. But remember that also the voters' roll is a very dynamic document. It's a very dynamic document in the sense that it gets updated on a daily basis. I mean, on a monthly basis, we're removing 30,000 people from the voters' roll as a result of death. So it means by the time we go to the elections in May next year, we probably would have removed 300,000 people from the voters' roll on the basis of death. But as that happens, people keep on also updating the
But you are ready. If an election is to be declared earlier, you'll be ready.
We are ready.
You will be ready. I see you are leaving the commission, your term is ending end of the year, so you are leaving before the election. Is your term going to be extended until the election? And what are you going to be doing afterwards? What's your next move? I see you are the vice president of Association of World Election Management. Is it something that you do post this stint, or what can you tell us?
Well, I'm an advisor, a senior advisor of Association of World Election Management Bodies.
Okay.
I'm a founder member of the Association of World Election Management Bodies, and currently we've got about 106 countries that are affiliated to that. And then when our term ended, having served 2 terms, in that they appointed me at a personal level as a
I see, so you can
advisor.
continue to
well,
shape
I'll continue playing in the space of the elections, but my term cannot be extended because
I've got to have to leave it
is
there.
in the Constitution.
But thank you so much for your time and sharing those election preparations with us. That was Frankly Speaking, coming to you live from Auckland Park and SABC. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Until we talk frankly again, may God bless you.